What's up, everybody? Welcome to the show, Kooks, Cranks, and Iconoclasts, the podcast, the lunchbox, the t-shirts, the action figures. Maybe one day. I'm your host, Mike Lucht. Today's topic, something I've wanted to cover since I started this show, a little group called the Borderland Sciences Research Foundation, started by a man named Meade, Layne. We're also going to talk about some of the other members, the extended membership of this group. We're going to talk a little bit about the early Space Brother contactee movement. This is sort of a precursor, a jumping in point, if you will, to what will be, in the next few episodes, a sort of unofficial look around the world. I've got several nations specifically targeted in my sights to take a look at, because this era is very interesting. This era leading up to World War II, where things get very complicated in and of themselves as far as the nexus between occultism, intelligence agencies, and ufology, aliens, cosmic intelligences, etc., spiritualism, the idea of ascended masters, etc. This is where all this stuff swirls together and connects like a big old knot of spaghetti. But you know what? It's a spicy meatball because there's so much crazy goodness in here. And I'm personally somewhat of a fan of the Borderland Sciences Research Foundation because they put out just so much stuff. There's so many crazy concepts packed into all this. So just to give you a sort of introductory idea, Meade, Layne and the BSRF, or the BSRA, as they were known, Borderland Sciences Research Associates, until it was changed in the 1960s to the BSRF. So that's probably what I'll be referring to them as throughout most of this episode. But they were publishing and contributing and creating and outsourcing all these theories and reports on strange aerial craft and non-human intelligences as early as 1945, which is a full 2 years before Kenneth Arnold's famous sighting of quote-unquote flying saucers over Mount Rainier on June 24th, 1947. 1947 was a banner year for weirdness, high strangeness. This is when, the Nag Hammadi scrolls were found. Crowley died. I believe this is also the year of the Babylon working. So there's a lot of crazy just interconnectedness of all this weird shit, especially in 1947. But, once again, this is 2 years earlier. Meade, Layne and the BSRF. What's also crazy is the Roswell incident was just a couple weeks after Kenneth Arnold's sighting of flying saucers over Mount Rainier. That was the coining of the term flying saucers, and then Roswell very much solidified the whole UFO concept in the zeitgeist at the time. So these people, this group, the BSRF, had all these crazy concepts that are still fringe in ufology today. This is where guys like John Keel and Jacques Vallée. This is where these guys sort of, they built upon what Meade, Layne and the BSRF contributed. This is where Trevor James Constable kind of comes into play. He was an associate of this group as well. But Layne's early publications essentially proposed that flying discs, flying saucers, UFOs, etc., were not extraterrestrial in the conventional sense, but originated from a parallel dimension or etheric plane interwoven with our own. And once again, this is an idea well outside the mainstream, even in ufological circles today. This is the birth of the ultra-terrestrial theory. In December 1946, the BSRF published its first formal statements about what Meade, Layne called the etheric interpretation of UFOs. He argued that these craft were normally invisible to the human eye, but became visible when they lowered in vibratory rate, into the visible spectrum, a concept rooted in theosophical and spiritualist cosmology, not aeronautics or hard science, believe it or not. These aren't the nuts and bolts guys. This is the hippy-dippy new age craziness. And man, do these people contribute to the vast amounts of literature and just strange out there ideas that these people that ufology can attribute to this group. According to Layne, the Etherians, as the intelligences piloting these ships were called, operated from an etheric counterpart to Earth, possibly aligned with esoteric ideas like inner Earth, the fourth dimension, subtle planes, astral realms, things like this. It's a very proto-New Age, pre-contactee space brother movement. So, once again, get ready for just an onslaught of high strangeness. And keep in mind that it's pre-Roswell. That's what's really crazy about all this to me. I'm kind of a fanboy of this group based and judged solely upon the vast amounts of out there ideas and concepts associated with them, and their sort of mail out zine that they were putting out, two actually. One called The Flying Roll, which was more of a Golden Dawn associated sort of occultism newsletter slash zine. And then you have The Round Robin, which is straight up on the ufological side, the ether ship mystery, Etherians, interdimensional hypothesis, etc. Very much dedicated to that. And that's their main go-to. It's where I got a lot of the information for today's show. God, so much high concept weirdness. So before we get into that, real quick, let's hear a word from our sponsors. Some things are unavoidable. I don't mean to watch the news, but you're flipping channels, it happens sometimes. And then, next thing you know, you're having a few drinks. Next thing you know after that, hangover. You can't escape the news, but you can't escape hangovers. And that's why I'm here to give you access, exclusive access, to a promo code that's going to get you 20% off your entire purchase with liqueur.com, liquure.com. Use the promo code ICON and get 20% off your total purchase at checkout. Liqueur gummies combine DHM, milk thistle, and B vitamins with ginger root to help your body recover after a night of drinking, or a day, or a weekend, maybe even your entire birthday month. It's up to you. Drink responsibly and handle hangovers responsibly and correctly with Liqueur, Liquure. Head to liqueur.com and use my promo code ICON for 20% off your entire purchase. Whoop! I accidentally just caught some news. Did you hear about that most recent political thing that happened? My goodness. I need to calm down. I need some Shimmerwood beverages. Shimmerwood's award-winning CBD seltzers combine full-spectrum CBD with natural fruit shrubs, delivering a refreshing, stress-relieving drink that eases tension and promotes relaxation. Enjoy an exclusive discount with my promo code at shimmerwood.com. Use the promo code ICON for 30% off your entire purchase. Get some, knock 'em back, and relax. shimmerwood.com. Whew, man, I could use like 6 Shimmerwoods right now. Okay. So, meet Layne and the Borderland Sciences Research Foundation. This is essentially the origin point of the ultra-terrestrial concept, the interdimensional hypothesis, if you will. It should be noted that the two are different, though there is a lot of overlap between the two. Interdimensional hypothesis kind of speaks for itself, obviously, that the source of the UFO phenomenon is from some other dimension in physics that we do not understand, something beyond space and time. The ultra-terrestrial hypothesis commonly refers to an idea that whatever this phenomenon is, it's been with mankind from jump. It's always been there. It's in our folklore, ancient astronaut theories, etc. A lot of concepts such as fairy lore, secret races of beings or entities or people, disembodied intelligences, poltergeist phenomena. Like these are all kind of classified under the ultra terrestrial banner. If you look back as far as Charles Fort, where we get the term Fortean for Fortean phenomena, for those unfamiliar, Charles Fort would be like the steampunk granddaddy of paranormal investigators. He's like a cross between Fox Mulder and Teddy Roosevelt. Maybe throwing a little Ambrose Bierce and a dash of Lovecraft in that. He coined the phrase, "I think we're property." He was a firm believer in the possibility that we are not at the top of the food chain as much as we like to think we are. Ancient astronaut theory with a dark edge, basically, who essentially made it his life's work to travel the world and just document and record and archive strange happenings and weird shit in general. Mysterious creature sightings, fish raining from the sky, a goat born with 3 heads, etc. Dogs and cats living together, of course. All this kind of stuff. Essentially, the term ultra-terrestrial casts a much wider net that has many aspects of trickster behavior to it. It encompasses high strangeness of all kinds. And then, of course, you've got your classic extraterrestrial hypothesis that these are straight up literal aliens from outer space. They use technology to get here, and throughout the vast majority of ufology's history, this has mostly been the most widely accepted explanation for who and or what all this is. And then finally, you've also got the psychosocial hypothesis, which essentially states that all of this is attributed to mass hysteria or sleep paralysis. It's all within the mind, basically. And out of all 3 of these frameworks for what exactly is going on when it comes to flying saucers, UFOs, UAPs, abductions, contactees, etc. And then, of course, each one of these, you've got your subdivisions like secret government technology, secret space program, breakaway civilization, Nazi UFOs, hollow earth theories, and then break it down even further, and you're getting into kookier and kookier territory, fringe explanations for what's going on. Now, as far as the Borderland Sciences Research Foundation goes, they are one of the first modern groups that is approaching ufology with a more proto-New Age, occult, esoteric model or framework of reality behind all this. So, the BSRF was founded in 1945 by Meade Layne, a professor of English and a lifelong student of the occult and spirit sciences, metaphysics, etc. It was established in San Diego. The organization positioned itself as a research body for investigating phenomena that fell outside the purview of mainstream science into the quote-unquote borderlands. So phenomena such as UFOs, etheric forces, spiritualist communications, unexplained technologies, earth mysteries, ley lines, etc. Layne created the BSRF to be a bridge between the emerging discourse on UFOs and older traditions of spiritualism and occult science. His goal was to not just catalog sightings or reports, but to interpret them through metaphysical frameworks influenced largely by theosophy, which pretty much this is the bridge into the New Age, theosophy was. As far as Meade Layne and the BSRF specifically, Rosicrucianism and the Golden Dawn, Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, are also big influences, as well as 19th century psychical research and the foundations of parapsychology as we know it today. Spiritualism and seances, this whole background played a large part in shaping how they approached UFOs and ufology. basically giving them a foundation for ideas like interdimensional travel, as well as government cover ups of metaphysical truths. There's a definite conspiracy taking place worldwide in the background. Spiritual initiations linked to UFO contact as a sort of shamanic initiation is on par with abductions or contactee experiences. Channeling is a big part of this, as we'll see going forward. Vibrational physics, spirit sciences, etc. According to a very interesting article posted on medium.com, quote, the occultist and contactees at the BSRF were well aware of the UFO phenomena as early as 1946, October of 1946, before the June 1947 Kenneth Arnold sightings, so before the modern UFO era began. During the Jacobini-Zinner meteor shower of October 9th, 1946, many claim to have seen UFOs. The BSRF authors labeled this phenomena Kareta, Kareeta. Newspapers reported there was a large and intense meteor shower on the 9th. This was also the first meteor shower to be spotted on radar. One has to seriously wonder, were some of the objects spotted on radar actually UFOs? Would the radar operators of the time even know what they were seeing? Many called into the BSRF as quote-unquote informants and reported what they saw. This may be the first recorded case of UFO reports being centrally collected, analyzed, and reported by a civilian agency. So this was the birth of the UFO subculture as well. In Volume 2, Number 10 of the Round Robin, their in-house zine slash mail-order catalog, basically, of just various forms of high strangeness as it relates to the ether ships, the Etherians, etc. Once again, they're using their own vocabulary before a lot of the stuff that we know and use today was even brought into existence. So flying saucers, flying discs, etc. Before all this entered the lexicon with Kenneth Arnold and Roswell, the example reports go on to state, quote, this object was about the size of an extremely large plane and carried two reddish lights. At first, it was moving with extraordinary speed, faster than any plane. I saw it twice. The second time, it crossed the face of the moon, and the flapping of its wings was plainly visible. The whole object seemed somewhat luminous. Another reads, it had two lights. Certainly was not a plane. No plane could maneuver that way. As another reads, I saw this object around 8 p.m. It was visible for about 3 minutes. On the right-hand side, as one faced the moon, in motion and coming toward the moon. It was bluish-white in color, but I did not see any lights. I saw something similar in South Carolina about 2 years ago. It was more bullet-shaped than this and left a vapor trail behind it. I did not see any wing motion last night. A nurse at the hospital told me she saw a very strange construction in the sky near the moon about 3 a.m. An amateur astronomer and a friend both saw this object. Moon was low and it was distant from the moon by about the moon's diameter. It was in slow motion, tending downward. Dark body, too large for a plane, shape hard to make out but seemed slightly crescent in outline. But Kareta is certainly no phenomena of nature, nor any craft or projectile known to us, and it is navigated, controlled, guided. It is neither delusion nor miracle, nor yet a work of earth production. It is our best evidence so far of otherworld visitors. Once again, we speak only from the limited data now at hand. So, once again, keeping in mind, these people are forging their own not only mythology, but they're coming up with a vocabulary to describe all this as well. And prior to this, you only had the mystery airships. If you count World War II, there's talk of green fireballs and ghost rockets, etc. But all this stuff up in the sky, all these ships flying around and their occupants, this is all new territory. 2 years before flying saucers and little green men, etc. This is stuff that they're forging on the fly, essentially. So Layne's most influential and controversial, quote unquote, contribution is the so called etheric hypothesis. Based on channeled messages from a trance medium named Mark Probert, Layne posited that the flying saucers being reported in the skies were not extraterrestrial in the traditional sense, but more interdimensional or etheric craft, which were vehicles from a parallel plane of reality vibrating at a different frequency or density than ours. These ether ships were piloted by beings he called Etherians, humanoid intelligences who claimed to be observing and subtly guiding, perhaps, humanity through cycles of planetary crisis and transformation. This was a radical departure from the emerging extraterrestrial hypothesis popularized by contactees like George Adamski, George Hunt Williamson, the other George, I get to George King of the Aetherius Society. We'll get into it. Layne's etheric hypothesis prefigures modern ultra-terrestrial or interdimensional theories and has been cited by Jacques Vallée and John Keel, as well as many others, Terence McKenna, I believe we mentioned earlier, as early non-materialist interpretations of the UFO phenomenon. The key elements of the etheric hypothesis are that UFOs are etheric in nature and must lower their vibrational rate to become visible or tangible. These ships may seem metallic, but are composed of refined matter from the etheric plane, that the Etherians operate from a hidden dimension in close proximity to Earth, so sort of overlapping or invisibly intersecting with our own reality, that human consciousness, and not just instrumentation like radar, etc., play a role in perceiving them. So Etherians are essentially the beings that Layne proposed as the explanation for the UFOs. He speculated that rather than representing advanced military or extraterrestrial technology, flying saucers were piloted by beings from a parallel dimension, which he called Etheria, and that their ether ships were usually invisible but could be seen when their atomic motion became slow enough. He further claimed that Etherians could become stranded on the terrestrial plane when their ether ships malfunctioned, and that various governments were aware of these incidents and had investigated them. And this is essentially what would cause crashes, etc., like in the Roswell incident. Furthermore, Layne argued that Etherians and their ether ships inspired much of Earth's mythology and religions, but that they were truly, behind it all, mortal beings who could be killed despite having high levels of technological and spiritual advancement. He claimed that their motive in coming to the Earth plane of existence was to reveal their accumulated wisdom to humanity, to sort of guide us, watch out for us, guardianship, stewardship, custodians from space, essentially. Veterinarians, maybe, depending on how one views the various medical processes that would go on in later abduction lore. These revelations would be relayed through individuals with sufficiently developed psychic abilities, allowing them to contact the Etherians and communicate with them directly. In particular, he relied extensively on the mediumship, the trans-channel mediumship of BSRF stalwart Mark Probert, as confirmation of many of his theories. Perhaps something of special note is a letter sent by Layne to the FBI just days after Roswell became public knowledge. This letter is known as Memorandum 6751. Memorandum 6751 is an informal designation for a Borderland Sciences Research Associates document entitled A Memorandum of Importance that was sent to the U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation in 1947. It was written by Meade Layne, who was the BSRA's director and main editor of the group's Round Robin and Flying Roll newsletters. The document has been described as having been, quote-unquote, classified by the FBI since its receipt and was released to the public as part of an overall federal government declassification program. However, it was certainly distributed through the BSRF quite freely and the information contained in the document was frequently written about by Layne and his associates in their various newsletters and mimeographs, or zines, if you will. The number 6751 appears to have been stamped on the document at the time of receipt, that the government received the letter, but does not seem to be an official document number. It states, a memorandum of importance, big letters at the top, San Diego, California, July 8, 1947. For your information, this memorandum is respectfully addressed to certain scientists of distinction, to important aeronautical and military authorities, to a number of public officials, and to a few publications. The writer has little expectation that anything of import will be accomplished by this gesture. The mere fact that the data herein were obtained by so-called supernormal means is probably sufficient to ensure its disregard by nearly all the persons addressed. Nevertheless, it seems a public duty to make it available. The present writer has several university degrees and was formerly a university department head. A very serious situation may develop at any time with regard to the quote-unquote flying saucers. If one of those should be attacked, the attacking plane will almost certainly be destroyed. In the public mind, this might create near panic and international suspicion. The principal data concerning these craft is now at hand and must be offered, no matter how fantastic and unintelligible it may seem to minds not previously instructed in thinking of this type. 1. Part of the discs carry crews, others are under remote control. 2. Their mission is peaceful. The visitors contemplate settling on this plane. 3. These visitors are human-like, but much larger in size. 4. They are not excarnate Earth people, but come from their own world. 5. They do not come from any quote-unquote planet, as we use the word, but from an etheric planet which interpenetrates with our own and is not perceptible to use. 6. The bodies of the visitors and the craft also automatically quote-unquote materialize on entering the vibratory rate of our dense matter. See apports. 7. The discs possess a type of radiant energy, or a ray, which will easily disintegrate any attacking ship. They re-enter the etheric at will, and so simply disappear from our vision without a trace. 8. The region from which they come is not the quote-unquote astral plane, but corresponds to the lokas or talas. Lokas and talas are, this is outside of the letter, but lokas and talas are a concept from Hinduism and esoteric Buddhism. Lokas are basically higher planes, but also kind of correspond with planets. And then the talas are essentially lower planes, which also correspond with planets. So it's kind of a amalgamation of the two ideas, essentially. But yeah, back to the letter. Students of esoteric matters will understand these terms. 9. They probably cannot be reached by radio, but probably can be by radar, if a signal system can be devised for that apparatus. We give information and warning and can do no more. Let the newcomers be treated with every kindness. Unless the discs are withdrawn, illegible, with which our culture and science are incapable of dealing. A heavy responsibility rests upon the few in authority who are able to understand this matter. Addendum. The lokas are oval shape, fluted length in, oval with a heat-resisting metal or alloy not yet known to us. The front edge contains the controls, the middle portion is a laboratory, the rear contains armaments, which consists essentially of a powerful, illegible energy apparatus, perhaps a ray apparatus, illegible. This is the only surviving copy, and it's from the 40s, so a lot of it's illegible. Note that in addition to some illegible text caused partially by later handwriting and stamping, the name and signature of Meade Layne has been redacted. We now know of Layne's authorship due to its later distribution throughout BSRF circles and newsletters. Several years later, a much more detailed 8-page version of this memorandum was sent to His Excellency the President, quote unquote, as well as the secretaries of the Air Force, Army, Navy, and the Secretary of Defense. This further fleshed out memorandum can be found at a link that will be provided in the show notes. According to the author of this website, unidentifiedphenomena.com, the major historical importance of this particular memo and its later follow-up revolves around the prominent inclusion of numerous metaphysical concepts that closely approach the realm of the paranormal. This includes mentions of such esoteric concepts as the lokas and talas, previously mentioned, as well as the abilities of these ships and their presumed inhabitants to simply, quote-unquote, dematerialize from view, not to mention the concept of some unknown etheric plane or planet which in some unknown manner is able to interact with our reality. So some of the other members of the BSRF include a woman by the name of Millen Cook, MillenCooke. Millen Cook is a lesser known but significant figure associated with the BSRF during its mid-20th century heyday. Her contributions are often overshadowed by more prominent names like Meade, Layne, or a gentleman by the name of Riley Crabb, who we'll discuss later. But Cook was deeply involved in the techno-gnostic, metaphysical, and esoteric currents of the time. She was born in 1895 and died in 1982. She was an American writer, spiritual researcher, and metaphysical theorist with interests that ranged from atomic alchemy to psychotronic energy, so no slouch this one. She emerged as a unique voice within the American occult and proto-New Age scenes from the 1940s to 1970s, particularly through her association with the BSRF. Little is known about her early personal life, but by the 1940s she was publishing speculative and esoteric writings that blended scientific metaphors with mystical insights. Her background may have included exposure to Theosophy, Rosicrucianism, or similar systems popular in the early 20th century, and she appears to have been self-educated in metaphysics, spiritualist thought, and speculative science. Cook's work became featured in BSRF newsletters during the mid-20th century, especially under the leadership of Riley Crabb, the man who would essentially take over the association, the foundation, after the death of Meade Layne. She was regarded as one of the BSRF's quote-unquote borderland thinkers, those who explored concepts lying at the threshold between science and occultism. Her writings were often included alongside others focused on radionics, etheric physics, alternative cosmologies, and the psychic sciences. Riley Crabb and other BSRF figures praised her as an advanced mind engaged in uncovering the quote-unquote invisible realities behind physical phenomena. She was never a formal staff member of the foundation, but her contributions were very influential, especially in the discourse surrounding quote-unquote etheric chemistry, interdimensional mechanics, and cosmic correspondences. Riley Crabb occasionally cited her work approvingly as evidence that non-mainstream thinkers were revealing the same truths as the BSRF channelers and occult scientists. Cook explored the idea that atomic and subatomic worlds were governed by energetic principles not yet recognized by mainstream physics. One of her key fascinations was with aether, or ether, interchangeable concepts really, which was a vibrational and conscious medium. She speculated on the interaction between thought and atomic matter, echoing some ideas found in radionics and psionics, which we'll get into here in a moment. She referred to aetherokinetics, the motion of ether-like substances, as a causal force behind both gravity and psychic phenomena. These ideas paralleled some of the BSRF's more outlandish psychic proposals. She was into vacuum genesis and psychic energy. Cook believed the physical universe was born from consciousness acting upon vacuum space, or a void of nothingness, primordial void of nothingness, a precursor to ideas in quantum mysticism. She described the no thing not as empty, but as pregnant with potential. Nothingness is essentially the creative element on a blank piece of paper, an empty room, etc., and so forth. I think you get the idea. Both energy and form could manifest when acted upon by will or intent. This corresponded with BSRF and theosophical ideas about mind stuff, or akasha, as the central focal point and starting origin point of reality. The Akashic records, the dreams that stuff is made of. Though she never directly claimed contact with any of the Etherians, Cook's descriptions of subtle energy vehicles and interdimensional travel dovetailed with Meade Layne's ethership hypothesis. She theorized that ultralight vehicles could navigate through alternate frequencies of matter, an idea which the BSRF cited in support of its position that flying saucers were vibrational craft from parallel dimensions. In one of her essays published through the BSRF, Cook described the human subtle body as an interface between universal energy and biological life. She proposed that the quote-unquote psychic double contained both karmic imprints and energy patterns, which could be consciously manipulated to induce healing or expanded perception. This intersected with similar work by radionics practitioners and bioenergetic researchers in the 1950s and 60s. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the term bioenergetic researchers, don't feel bad. Most people are. I was. But it turns out that a great deal of what was going on during the Cold War was being done by bioenergetic researchers. But I'm getting ahead of myself. While Cook never published full-length books, her articles appeared in a number of fringe science journals and newsletters. Some known titles include Atherokinetics, the Dynamics of the Subatomic Ether, which was published by the BSRF in the 1950s. This essay outlined her theory of energetic substrata beneath physical matter. She wrote Vacuum Genesis and the Creative Will, which was about a metaphysical interpretation of our cosmic origins, drawing from mysticism, theosophy, and proto-quantum mysticism ideas, basically. There's also The Hidden Side of Gravity, a speculative physics essay claiming that gravity was the result of vibrational entrainment between matter and etheric currents. These articles often circulated among BSRF subscribers, radionics practitioners, and fringe inventors. Some of her works were reprinted or quoted in newsletters by the Associations of Metascience, the Psionic Research Institute, and the Spiritual Frontiers Fellowship, which were fellow travelers, various institutes and organizations of the same mindset. One of her writings, The Son of the Sun, which she wrote under the pseudonym Alexander Blade, first appeared in Fantastic Adventures in November 1947, and was later reprinted in the 1958 Flying Saucer Review, an issue associated with the BSRF and its publications. The piece presents a cosmic narrative. Non-human, godlike beings have always been among humans, hidden guides that now reassert themselves as humanity approaches a pivotal evolutionary threshold. These beings have left ancient symbolic landmarks, notably in Egypt, and secret society lore throughout history, including symbols adopted into modern U.S. emblems, i.e. the Great Seal of the United States of America, used to preserve knowledge across generations. This writing warns of humanity's self-destructive capabilities, but proposes that if we accept assistance at the right moment, a new millennium of enlightened civilization could emerge. This offer contrasts with prior civilizations where such knowledge remained confined to elite sects and secret societies, whereas this is more desovereignized and democratized for everyone to have access to it. Son of the Sun is among the earliest UFO-themed stories, bridging occultism and spiritualist traditions with modern UFO mythology, appearing before mainstream events like the Kenneth Arnold sighting, as mentioned before, and Roswell as well. The narrative incorporates motifs such as hidden extraterrestrial overseers, ancient esoteric science, and symbolic templates passed through the various secret societies, all elements that echo in later UFO and esoteric traditions. Cook's work represents a clear fusion of BSRF interests such as psychic channeling, invisible influence from higher intelligences, and the evolution of humanity through guided revelation, which are all core themes in the Borderland circles. Son of the Sun embodies the ethereal fiction writing tradition commonly used in early UFO and occult publishing, often circulated via Borderland publications and platforms. The full text of Son of the Sun is available in PDF or text format via Scribd and other archives, often credited to Alexander Blade, the aforementioned pen name of Millen Cook. The blog of a fellow by the name of Hakan Blomqvist, HAKANBLOMQVIST, includes commentary and context on Blade's works and their place in early UFO literature. Also, probably worth noting that a friend of Millen's believed that she didn't write the article, but rather her visitor had. Probably some alien or etheric intelligence that she was channeling. Millen Cook's influence was quiet but enduring in fringe science and New Age circles, though she never gained mainstream notoriety. Her ideas anticipated later concepts in morphic resonance, as put forward by the scientist Rupert Sheldrake, zero-point energy theories, and subtle energy medicine. Within the BSRF, she was one of the clearest voices attempting to bridge metaphysical vision with technical or pseudoscientific language. Her writings provided intellectual scaffolding for BSRF's more radical claims, helping them present channeling and UFO contact in a format that looked, at least on the surface, a lot like theoretical physics. Even today, her work continues to circulate in obscure archives and reprints found in collections of etheric science and early New Age thought. Also, very worthy of note, Millen Cook was married to a gentleman by the name of Brinsley Lepore Trench, the 8th Earl of Clancarty, a prominent British ufologist and author. Their marriage helped solidify a cross-Atlantic link between British and American esoteric UFO communities. Millen Cook sometimes used the name Millen Lepore Trench, and Brinsley Lepore Trench had married each other sometime in the 50s or 60s, though exact records on the date are sparse in open source materials. Some sources imply their union was as much intellectual and ideological as it was personal, with both deeply embedded in the contactee culture, esoteric interpretations of UFOs, and ancient astronaut theories in their early days. In some surviving correspondence in ufology circles, especially among British fringe publications, she is referred to using variations like Lady Millen Lepore Trench, acknowledging her title through marriage. Brinsley Lepore Trench, not necessarily a official BSRF member, but an interesting cat nonetheless. He was a British conservative peer, member of the House of Lords, make of that what you will. He was also a lifelong UFO enthusiast and author of several books proposing extraterrestrial contact throughout human history. Yet another early ancient astronaut theorist. Some of his most notable works include The Sky People, written in 1960, Gods of the New Millennium, Operation Earth, and Secret of the Ages, UFOs from Inside the Earth. So, one of the stalwart proponents of hollow Earth UFO theories. He was actually probably the leading proponent of hollow Earth theories as far as their intersection with UFOs, and believed that extraterrestrials had bases inside the planet, ideas that strongly overlap with BSRF material and with Mark Probert's channelings that Mill and Cook had championed. Their partnership represents a kind of fusion of British aristocratic legitimacy and American fringe science, giving added weight to some early theories about ancient aliens and suppressed secret technologies. Brinsley's public platform in the UK Parliament gave him opportunities to advocate UFO disclosure at the government level, which was highly, highly unusual for the time. Millen's fictionalized spiritual narratives, like the aforementioned Son of the Sun, mirrored and possibly influenced much of Brinsley Lepore Trench's ancient alien arguments. Another member of the BSRF, a gentleman by the name of Dr. Gerald Light. Dr. Light Dr. Light is a particularly enigmatic figure in the history of American ufology and fringe metaphysics, but he's probably best known, if not entirely known, for his alleged 1950 letter claiming to have witnessed alien ships at Muroc Air Force Base, which is now known as Edwards Air Force Base, which is one of the Air Force bases quite commonly associated with ufology. He was allegedly there alongside various high-ranking officials. His name is frequently invoked in conspiracy circles, especially within BSRF lore, but his true identity and credentials remain somewhat murky. Many researchers consider him to likely be a pseudonym, probably a Meade Layne himself, or someone else within the BSRF circle. Some researchers suggest that Gerald Light may have been a pen name for an individual by the name of John McCoy, or a fictional persona used to deliver controversial claims while protecting the author's identity. The Borderland Sciences Research Foundation and associated contactee networks often use pseudonyms to preserve anonymity or for dramatic effect or esoteric credibility, sometimes referred to in New Age literature as a quote-unquote clairvoyant metaphysician, supposedly tied to esoteric groups like the Sananda movement or early I Am activity circles. The I Am activity group, something of a, let's say, somewhat problematic group. We're not going to get too deep into them, though. These associations are mostly anecdotal, however. Then there's the Gerald Light letter, as mentioned before. This is a popular, almost foundational bit of conspiracy. I don't want to say trivia, but that's what it is. Trivia, and it's also somewhat foundational in that a lot of people have based a lot of their work around it. The most famous artifact, we'll say artifact, attributed to Gerald Light is a letter dated April 16th, 1954, which first appeared in BSRF newsletters in the early 1950s and was later widely circulated among many, many, many UFO researchers. Highlights of the letter include that Dr. Light, can't get used to calling him that, Dr. Light claimed he was part of a delegation of high-profile individuals invited to Muroc Air Force Base who witnessed landed extraterrestrial craft and engaged in discussions about the implications with others present. He wrote that he had traveled to Muroc, aka Edwards Air Force Base, with Edwin Norse, who was President Truman's economic advisor, James Forrestal, the then Secretary of Defense, who later died under mysterious circumstances, officially a suicide. But if you know your UFO lore, you probably know about James Forrestal. Let's see. There was also Bishop McIntyre, a prominent West Coast religious leader, and Franklin Allen, science editor of the Hearst newspapers. So these are consequential people of the time. He claimed the ships were real and that the government officials were in a panic over how to respond publicly. He expressed frustration that religious, scientific, and military authorities were divided on disclosure and were likely to suppress the event. And boy, did he call that one. There's a brief excerpt from the letter I've got here. Quote, when we were allowed to enter the restricted section after about 6 hours in which we were checked on every possible item, event, incident, and aspect of our personal and public lives, I had the distinct feeling that the world had come to an end with fantastic realism. For I have never seen so many human beings in a state of complete collapse and confusion as they realized that their own world had indeed ended with such finality as to beggar description. The reality of quote-unquote other plane aeroforms is now and forever removed from the realms of speculation and made a rather painful part of the consciousness of every responsible scientific and political group. During my 2 days visit, I saw 5 separate and distinct types of aircraft being studied and handled by our Air Force officials with the assistance and permission of the Etherians. I have no words to express my reactions. He would also write of a potential cover-up in a later letter, which states, quote, I wish to go on record as saying that at this moment, responsible men and women in positions of governmental authority are often near to nervous collapse with the terrible knowledge which they are endeavoring, for good reasons, to withhold from the public, but they do not know why these strange creatures in their strange craft are here, nor what they plan to do to our Earth. Nor does anyone else, unless they are willing to listen to sources of information which are of a spiritual nature, i.e., mental, psychic, metaphysical, not religionistic in the usual sense of that word. Yet many students of metaphysics and many mediums, mystics, and clairvoyants refuse to listen, as well as the multitude who will not consider any happenings which may be personally unpleasant to them. Unquote. So the significance of this Muroc story, this allegedly predates the public surfacing of Roswell-related lore by nearly a decade. The letter is sometimes viewed as a precursor to the Majestic 12 hoax, which also named James Forrestal, and it became a foundational text in the BSRF's emerging belief that UFOs were interdimensional in nature rather than actual nuts and bolts craft. Dr. Light's philosophical and metaphysical claims include that, whether as an individual or composite persona, he represented a New Thought metaphysician deeply enmeshed in BSRF's core beliefs. He advocated the idea that UFOs were also etheric or vibrational vehicles, perceptible only under certain conditions or to clairvoyance. His quote-unquote testimony was cited as credible metaphysical confirmation that mainstream officials were encountering quote-unquote etheric technologies, but refusing to disclose it due to public panic or religious collapse. He may have also been involved with or used as a stand-in for Mark Probert's channelings, which offered similar conclusions about secret elite contact with the Etherians. Gerald Light disappeared from the public record, however, almost immediately after this letter. Make of that what you will. Some later BSRF newsletters from the 1950s and 60s continued to refer to his claims, especially when arguing that contact had already occurred, but was being systematically covered up by governments and religious authorities. His supposed statements were not widely accepted in mainstream ufology until reintroduced by conspiracy authors like Bill Cooper and Bill English. William Milton Cooper, Pale Horse Rider himself. No independent verification of any of the individuals mentioned in the Muroc/Edwards Air Force Base trip, such as Norse Forrestal, Bishop McIntyre, has ever been confirmed. Forrestal, who, for a government official, was very deeply tied into UFO lore, as mentioned earlier, died under mysterious circumstances in 1949 when he jumped or fell out of a window in a sanitarium, which only added to the mystique and conspiracy surrounding the story of his death. Most researchers today regard Dr. Light as either a fictional narrative used by either Layne or Probert to dramatize the BSRF's metaphysical claims, or a forerunner of intentional myth-making within the contactee community to basically encourage disclosure, for lack of a better term, of these etheric technologies and esoteric sciences. Now, heard me mention the name Mark Probert several times. This guy was sort of the golden child. I mean, he's an old man, but he's the golden boy of the group. He was their trans-channel medium, claimed to have communicated with extraterrestrial beings and shared information about UFOs and related phenomena. His UFO-related theories are considered by many to be part of the contactee movement, which became popular in the 1950s onwards. Probert's claims were not widely accepted within the scientific or mainstream UFO research communities, and they should be viewed as unverified and speculative, according to most sources. Some of the key aspects around his theories include contact with extraterrestrial beings, which Probert claimed to have made contact with these beings from other planets through psychic or telepathic communication. Planets or planes. He asserted that these beings provided him with information about their origins, intentions, and knowledge about advanced technologies. He alleged that the extraterrestrial beings he communicated with were concerned about the state of the Earth and humanity's future. He also claimed that they conveyed messages of peace, spiritual growth, and the need for humans to evolve both morally and technologically. He suggested that UFOs were not necessarily spacecraft in the traditional sense, but actually vehicles that could traverse dimensions or exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. It's a concept that aligns with some fringe theories about UFO propulsion and the nature of extraterrestrial visitors. His theories often delved into metaphysical and spiritual topics. He believed in the concept of reincarnation and suggested that humans were part of a cosmic evolution guided by extraterrestrial beings who were more spiritually advanced. Like many contactees, Probert did not provide concrete evidence to support his claims. His communications with extraterrestrial beings were largely personal, subjective experiences. Were not subject to scientific scrutiny or verification. He's a researcher, historian, and writer specializing in the paranormal, occult history, and unexplained phenomena. And, of course, mentioned before, a trance channeler and medium. Probably best known for his coverage of esoteric subjects, which included secret societies, government intelligence agencies, and fringe paranormal topics. He's contributed extensively to research on the Borderland Sciences Research Foundation and related occult paranormal investigations. His work often explores the intersections between spiritualism, conspiracy theory, and intelligence operations, highlighting lesser-known historical figures and secretive organizations in his work, which has appeared in various occult research journals, podcasts, documentary projects, etc. Anything focused on hidden history or paranormal investigations. Now, I've got a basic clarification, I guess, a play-by-play, if you will, of how these trance medium sessions typically worked in the context of the Borderland Sciences Research Foundation and related groups, particularly in the era and style associated with people like Meade, Layne, and Riley Crabb, who we'll get into in a moment. But basically, number one is preparation and setting. So the medium, more likely than not, will be Mark Probert. He usually is in all these settings. They had a couple others, but he's the main guy. He would enter a quiet, dark room designed to minimize distractions. The participants, or gawkers, scribes, etc. Sometimes one person or maybe a small group would be present to witness or assist, and the environment often included symbolic or ritualistic items like candles, crystals, esoteric artifacts, quote unquote, meant to aid the medium's concentration and spiritual connections. Next would be the induction of the trance. So the medium would enter a trance state, which is a form of altered state of consciousness, where the individual's normal waking awareness is suspended. This was often achieved through deep relaxation or meditation techniques, rhythmic breathing, chanting, and guided visualizations. Sometimes a helper or guide or gawker, just another member of the group, would facilitate the trance induction by speaking softly or playing a repetitive sound, perhaps the use of mantras, if you will. Once in a trance, the medium would claim to allow an external entity, often a spirit or Etherean being, to speak or communicate through them. Basically, it's a form of spirit possession that is much more controlled than you would see in like voodoo or obviously Catholic demonic possession, etc. That's a whole other rigmarole. But the medium would speak in a different voice or tone, usually, sometimes completely different from their normal speech. Communication could come as verbal messages or automatic writing, sometimes even drawings. And the messages often contained metaphysical teachings, scientific speculation about the etheric realms, or instructions regarding hidden knowledge. Many times, I don't know specifically for Probert, but many times these trance mediums in this UFO contactee milieu, and spiritualists to a degree too, would channel blueprints for various devices, which I find very interesting. Like to see the engineering background of some of these people. I'm sure it's practically non-existent, but I don't know. Channeling blueprints for various devices is very interesting. But yeah, they start interacting and asking questions with the channeled entity, if you will. The participants would probably ask the trance entity, or the medium would relay the answers. Sometimes the trance would deepen or shift as the spirit or entity took control, quote unquote. Sessions could last from a few minutes to several hours, depending on the group's goals or what information they're trying to find out. And then, once all the question and answer session was done, they would close the session. The medium would be guided out of the trance carefully, kind of a hypnosis process, open and close, often with the help of another member, or by self-regulation if they've been doing this a while. The group would debrief and take notes or discuss the messages received, and some sessions were recorded or written for later study. Meade, Layne, and his followers often emphasized that these communications came from the etheric beings associated with a hidden etheric world, and the messages frequently included references to advanced technologies like the ether ships mentioned earlier, or critiques, we'll call it, mainstream science. Riley Crabb, in his later work, incorporated more radical ideas, blending spiritualism with conspiracy theories and alternative history, which also reflected in the trance communications quite often. The example trance medium session is usually held with a medium who went into trance, channeled the entity from the parallel dimension or etheric realm, and then within a few minutes, the medium's eyes were closed, their voice shifted, their tone of speech, their voice sometimes even. And usually the message would consist of something like, "We are the Etherians, inhabitants of the luminous plane that exists beyond your physical perception. Your scientists are beginning to annoy us." No, they would say, "Your scientists are beginning to glimpse fragments of the ether, but lack the vision to harness its power. The ether ship you seek is not of this Earth's known technology. It sails the sea of energy surrounding your planet." Orgone, chi, prana, the force from Star Wars. It's kind of all the same concept, really. A participant would ask questions such as, "What is the purpose of your communications?" And they would reply in kind to say something along the lines of, To awaken your minds to the greater reality, your world is on the brink of transformation. Prepare to understand the interconnections between matter, spirit, and energy. And then the medium's voice gradually would return to normal once the session was winding down. They'd be brought out of the trance. The group, once again, they'd just kind of discuss and analyze the message, emphasizing encouragement towards scientific and spiritual progress, as was their wont. Sessions often reported sensory phenomena, changes in temperature, faint lights, or sounds thought to be from the etheric realm. So, what I'm sure are very rare occasions, you have sort of accompanying phenomena to these trance sessions. The trance communication stressed a techno-gnostic worldview, which blended spiritual knowledge with technology, especially regarding ethership concept. Some trance sessions reportedly lasted several hours, with multiple entities, quote-unquote, taking turns speaking. Everyone gets a ride. Skepticism was present, even within the Borderland Sciences Research Foundation, which is something I can appreciate within a group such as this. But members saw these sessions as sincere attempts to access hidden knowledge, whether it be from the etheric realms or the subconscious mind. Some of the many quote-unquote channeled entities the BSRF worked with included Borealis Talano, who is or was, according to her channeler and science fiction author Rolf Talano and others, she's a priestess of the etheric plane of Venus. There's also the extended universe of contact entities dubbed the Inner Circle, aka Kethra Ida, or that translates to Teachers of Light, which is the collective name given by a group of spirit contacts led by the aforementioned Probert spirit contact Iyada the Shiite, that were reputedly channeled by Probert, who, among other things, served as primary sources for Meade Layne's interpretation of the flying saucers as the ethership mystery. While Probert and his peers professed to his ability to channel a vast group of spirits, so many, in fact, that time precludes an extensive investigation into such, but there is a whole lot.
5 minutes later.
And those are the characters that live inside Mark Probert's head. So one of the BSFR's most well-known publications was The Ethership Mystery and Its Solution, compiled from Layne and Probert's trance communications. This pamphlet slash zine slash mimeographed bit of BSRF literature outlined the messages allegedly received from the Etherian entities, including the aforementioned Inner Circle, which is a group of advanced beings offering insight into cosmic evolution, earth changes and mysteries, and coming spiritual upheavals. So in these sessions, the Etherians often warned of global catastrophes, the misuse of atomic energy, misguided scientific materialism, which, yeah, okay. I don't know. I feel not enough people were slapping science on the wrist as well, which they need every so often. The suppression of esoteric knowledge by governments and religions as well. So the ethership mystery, particularly as discussed in the context of the Borderland Sciences Research Foundation and Meade Layne's writings, does touch upon the idea that certain esoteric knowledge was being suppressed or hidden by mainstream governments, religious institutions, and media, as well as academia, or mainstream science. So the book describes the Etherians, these etheric beings from the etheric plane, who allegedly possessed advanced knowledge about the ether, which, like I said earlier, is also equated with chi, prana, vril, the Force from Star Wars, etc. Energy fields and non-physical realms. It's said to include advanced technologies related to etheric travel, healing, and communication beyond the five senses. Essentially, technologies that are able to tap into and use this energy, this orgone, ether. They're under the ether model, but essentially it's all the same thing. According to Layne and later BSRF advocates, mainstream science, governments, and organized religions have deliberately ignored, ridiculed, or actively suppressed this information because it conflicted with prevailing orthodox views, especially the rise of materialistic physics and institutional dogma. I remember when I was doing my Trevor James Constable episode, he quite frequently brings up ether and vortex physics, and I have absolutely no idea. I kind of get some of it, but I don't even know regular physics. So trying to grasp a whole new system, no less, of physics centered upon this theoretical energy, not so much. But governments are seen as the suppressors of this knowledge out of fear. It would change everything. It would upend their pre-existing power structures and financial slave systems. That's essentially what they are. Religious institutions allegedly suppress these teachings because they threaten conventional theology and their control over spiritual narratives. And while the ethership mystery itself doesn't provide extensive hard evidence for a lot of this, it implies that the Etherians themselves were hidden by those in power and, according to certain narratives, have secret alliances, if you will, with various covert factions, secret societies, etc. Layne's own experiences and contacts with these etheric entities are deliberately ignored or dismissed by the authorities, by mainstream science and academia. The disappearance or discrediting of early etheric researchers and mediums is a direct result of these organized suppression efforts. Lots of zero-point energy people, mavericks and whistleblowers, etc., are secretly being offed before anyone even knows who they are or what it is they're trying to do or say. And that certain technological breakthroughs related to etheric energy were classified or buried by the military-industrial complex. The idea that fringe or esoteric scientific knowledge is suppressed fits with a much broader narrative common in mid-20th century occult and conspiracy circles, or conspirituality, if you will. The BSRF linked their claims to these themes, suggesting their research was an attempt to resurrect and protect this hidden knowledge. Military and intelligence interests are in charge of a lot of this public denial and suppression. The BSRF sources and Meade Layne specifically suggests that while government agencies, especially military intelligence, defense agencies, etc., while they're quietly interested in etheric phenomena and psychic research, such as remote viewing and radionics, psionics, etc., this we know for a fact, they officially deny and ridicule such concepts publicly. And this dual posture was allegedly to maintain control over advanced technologies and prevent public panic or loss of strategic and financial advantages. It's claimed that certain technologies hinted at in these etheric communications, such as anti-gravity, propulsion systems, energy weapons, healing devices, etc., were researched covertly. However, these were never disclosed due to fears that widespread knowledge would destabilize existing political or economic systems. References to techno-gnostic channeling in BSRF material implies that some advanced scientific principles were conveyed by the Etherians, but never allowed to enter mainstream scientific discourse. The BSRF literature recounts how early researchers in etheric and psychic phenomena were often publicly discredited or ridiculed. This could include character assassination, removal of funding, forced silence, effectively suppressing their findings from broader scientific acceptance, threat to dogma, the esoteric knowledge purportedly revealed by these Etherian revelations or through trance mediumship often conflicts with orthodox religious doctrines, especially concerning the nature of the soul, the afterlife, and cosmology. I will say the mainstream religious view tends to often gravitate towards it's a demon. Everything's a demon. If it's not from the one source, everything else, demon, demon, demon. So, I don't know. It seems they're kind of hung up on that whole narrative. Religious institutions aiming to preserve doctrinal authority allegedly suppress these ideas to avoid challenges to their teachings. The BSRF's narrative suggests that mystical and occult knowledge, like that of the Theosophical Society, spiritualism, or even the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, they're branded heretical or occult, dangerous knowledge by mainstream churches, limiting the proliferation of such teachings or revelations or knowledge, etc. There are hints that some religious groups seek to control spiritual narratives by labeling mediumship and channeling as demonic or fraudulent, suppressing any genuine metaphysical discoveries conveyed by the etheric entities who are in fact actually demons, etc. There's the suppression of eugenics enthusiast Nikola Tesla's free energy concept. While not directly from the ethership mystery, conspiracy and fringe science circles often link Tesla's suppressed quote-unquote free energy research to broader etheric knowledge suppression. Tesla reportedly communicated with or accessed secret knowledge from the etheric realm or etheric entities, but his patents and research were seized by the uncle of the sex offender in chief, sidelined by government interest after his death. Later 20th century projects like the Stargate program, which investigated remote viewing and psychic phenomena, suggest official interest, but also periods of denial and secrecy, fitting the BSRF narrative of hidden knowledge. When is it appropriate to admit to interest in such things? When is it tactically or strategically advantageous to deny or ridicule such teachings or interest? Organizations like the Society for Psychical Research face criticism and accusations of suppressing and sanitizing evidence about genuine paranormal phenomena to protect scientific orthodoxy. So that's right, even the Society for Psychical Research isn't safe from the BSRF. The BSRF newsletters and Meade Layne's letters occasionally mention government agents monitoring their activities or requesting information covertly, implying official unease or morbid curiosity, let's say, was never publicly acknowledged. Channeled messages through Mark Probert and others often included warnings that the truth, capital T, truth, is being concealed by quote-unquote dark forces in government, church hierarchies, which work to keep humanity in a perpetual state of ignorance. I mean, look around, make an assessment. The ethership mystery and the BSRF's broader work portray a world where advanced metaphysical knowledge, particularly about etheric energy and non-physical realms, is real but deliberately suppressed by powerful institutions for reasons of control, fear, and preservation of power and orthodox worldviews. Texts also contain elaborate diagrams, as I mentioned before, channeled blueprints, and descriptions of etheric ship propulsion using odic force, energies and principles resembling radionics and Reichian orgone theory. Now, radionics, said a few times, I was largely unfamiliar with this, and to a large degree still am. I've looked into it a little bit when I was researching Trevor James Constable, but radionics essentially is a controversial and largely quote-unquote pseudoscientific practice that claims to diagnose and treat illnesses by detecting and manipulating subtle energy fields or vibrations emanating from living beings, objects, or locations. It's often described as a form of quote-unquote energy medicine or electrodiagnostic technique, which purports to work at a distance using specially designed instruments and devices. That the human body emanates certain energy fields is very much a truth. It's a reality. Whether you want to talk about Kirlian photography or small, subtle electromagnetic resonances, etc. As I mentioned earlier, bioenergetics and the research into this field. I would say essentially the creation and research into this field during the Cold War. Man, I don't want to give too much away, but we'll get into it down the road. I promise. So, radionics traces its roots back to the early 20th century. It's initially developed by Dr. Albert Abrams, born 1863, died 1924, a San Francisco-based physician. Abrams claimed that all diseases could be detected and treated by analyzing electromagnetic vibrations or quote-unquote energy signatures emitted by the human body. Abrams created devices like the oscilloclast or radioclast, which he said could diagnose and treat diseases remotely by tuning into these energy frequencies. Later practitioners expanded on these ideas, including devices that resemble radio tuners with dials and antennas, but without conventional electronics. These devices are said to be able to quote-unquote tune in to specific energy patterns. Radionics practitioners claim to use their devices to analyze a quote-unquote rate or frequency emitted by a patient's blood, hair, or other samples, bodily fluids, sometimes even a photograph or personal belongings. Anything that carries the biosignature, if you will, of that particular person. And this rate corresponds to specific health conditions or imbalances. After diagnosis, practitioners adjust the device's dials or settings to broadcast the corrective or counteractive energy frequencies to the patient or their particular malady, if you will, often remotely, aiming to restore balance and promote healing. There's no physical contact required, not necessarily, at least. A key aspect of radionics is that the practitioner does not need to be near the patient. The energetic influence is said to be transmitted through subtle fields or etheric forces. The Borderland Sciences Research Foundation was particularly interested in radionics because it fits right into their broader techno-gnostic framework and an attempt to merge mystical or spiritual knowledge with advanced and often secret technologies. The BSRF researchers explored connections between radionics, etheric energies, and fringe physics, theorizing that radionics might tap into certain dimensions or energies beyond conventional science. Radionic devices were sometimes described as tools to communicate with the Etherians or other spiritual entities, intelligences, etc., effectively bridging technology with the supernatural. Now, we know that psychotronics is a thing, and that's very much what this sounds like. So, the way I understand it is that radionics is essentially just another name for psychotronics. It carries very much the baggage of the Soviet super science, quote unquote, the Cold War, and connotations of parapsychology, etc., that are somewhat built into the word. There is no scientifically accepted physical principle explaining how radionics could function. The devices contain no active electronic components producing the claimed effects. I've not looked too deeply into radionics, to be honest with you. As far as my understanding is that this is on par with psychotronics, at least any kind of effective form of radionics would be. However, I will say I found a book of radionic devices that all seems to be charts and infographics, essentially, that are just contained on the page of the book. Quite interested to see what's in there, to say the least. So, a lot of people assume that this is all based on placebo effect and certain psychological factors. Some researchers attribute reported benefits to the placebo effect, subjective interpretation, or psychosomatic responses, essentially. But there is something to be said for psychosomatic responses. I mean, You have a patient who is tormented by invisible snakes. Perhaps the best medicine is to get them an invisible mongoose. It's another form of medicine. That's essentially the foundations of magic and shamanism. That arguably that specific scenario. So some see radionics as a spiritual technology, an instrument to work with vibrations and consciousness rather than physical matter, and its appeal partly lies in the blend of scientific-sounding apparati with mystical claims, offering a sense of hidden or advanced knowledge, which once again can play into placebo effect and psychosomatic responses of the body and mind. Radionic devices that are perhaps the most well-known are the Abrams oscilloclast, invented by the aforementioned Dr. Albert Abrams in the early 1900s, claimed to analyze blood or tissue samples by detecting electromagnetic oscillations. It featured dials and meters, supposedly measuring the body's quote-unquote rates. It was used to diagnose diseases and destroy pathogens with corrective vibrations. It was widely criticized and discredited as fraud by medical authorities at the time. There's also the Hieronymus machine, perhaps the most well-known radionic device, developed by Benjamin Franklin Hieronymus, which is, that's a name that commands not quite respect, but definitely makes you want to say it. It's created in the 1940s. It's a box with dials and a quote-unquote stick pad sensor designed to detect and broadcast what are known as eloptic energies. It's a term that Hieronymus coined for subtle biological or bioenergetic forces, claimed to diagnose illnesses and direct healing energy remotely into the subject, or patient, if you will. Hieronymus published studies claiming positive results, but never gained scientific acceptance. There's also the radionics rate meter. These are various models which were produced by radionics practitioners throughout the mid to late 20th century. These machines had multiple dials, sliders, and antennas. They looked very scientific. Operators would adjust settings to quote-unquote tune in to specific energetic patterns linked to ailments, often used in conjunction with sample holders such as a slot or a compartment, if you will, for blood, hair, or even photographs of the patient. Practitioners would quote-unquote broadcast healing frequencies, sometimes via mailed instructions for distant treatments. Some of the key figures in radionics, beyond the aforementioned Albert Adams and Benjamin Franklin Hieronymus, include Dr. Ruth Drown, born 1891, died 1965, on dry land, I think. She's an American chiropractor and radionics practitioner. Developed the Drown radiotherapy devices in the 1940s and 50s, which claimed to diagnose and cure diseases remotely using blood samples and radionics instruments. She was arrested and prosecuted by the FDA in the 1950s for medical fraud, making a significant legal crackdown on radionics. Essentially, the same thing that happened to Dr. Wilhelm Reich for his orgone accumulators. However, what happened to him was awful, and he had some definite ideas that are worth checking out. He was the first person I ever covered doing this show. First episode when I started this show, because despite his reputation, he has many, many good ideas that are worth looking into. Specifically, his psychiatric ideas, the birth of fascism and sexual neuroses, etc., things of this nature. Kind of brings to the whole point of the show that you don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. There's also Dr. George Deloire, born 1916, died 2003. He's a British radionics researcher and inventor who created advanced radionics devices and wrote extensively about radionics as a subtle energy science. Founded the International Institute of Radionics, and his work linked radionics with psychic phenomena and subtle energy fields. There's also once again, the aforementioned Benjamin Franklin Hieronymus, born 1899, died 1982. Inventor of the aforementioned Hieronymus machine, which introduced eloptic energy as a concept for the subtle energy that radionics devices detect. His machine is one of the best known examples of radionics instrumentation or devices. The BSRF embraced radionics as part of their techno-gnostic worldview, the idea that secret, ancient, or esoteric knowledge could be accessed and harnessed via specialized technology. Their newsletters and bulletins often included articles discussing radionics in relation to etheric engines, psychic phenomena, and interdimensional communications. They suggested that radionics could be a way to tap into the ether ships or spiritual intelligences such as the Etherians. The BSRF also linked radionics to broader fringe physics and alternative healing, viewing it as a tool that might one day be scientifically validated or understood through new physics models. I somewhat agree with this in that we're only just now exploring the surface, if you will, of consciousness studies, mind over matter, things of this nature. So perhaps there is a way that these devices, this field of study, is potentially able to tap into something no other scientific or medicinal discipline is quite able to tap into the same way that radionics does. But what I know about medicine would fill a warehouse and beyond. So radionics has become emblematic of the mid-20th century intersection of spiritualism, psychology, parapsychology, and alternative healing in medicine. It reflects a broader desire to scientifically legitimize esoteric and psychic phenomena using the language and apparatus of modern medicine and technology. And despite lacking scientific credibility, radionics has influenced other fields such as orgonomy, psychotronic, some alternative medicines, and even energy medicine practices such as Reiki, things of this nature. Really, when it comes down to it, bottom line is, if it helps, it helps. Now, Layne and the BSRF represented a unique fusion of old school spiritualism and futuristic technoscience, and their techno-gnostic ethos of the BSRF combined seance with science, transmediumship, ectoplasmic phenomena, theosophical cosmology, the planes of reality, the ascended masters, as mentioned at the top of the episode, and emerging ideas in energy healing, subtle forces, bioenergetics, as mentioned before as well, and consciousness studies. Probert's trance entities, including one named Dr. Bindelhoffen, as well as the aforementioned Yada de Shiite and others, spoke in a blend of scientific jargon, mystic allegory, and urgent prophecy. And these sessions were documented in dozens upon dozens of mimeographed BSRF bulletins, aka zines. They just weren't called zines yet at the time. Unlike other spiritualist groups of the time, the BSRF placed heavy emphasis on technical diagrams, transmission theory, and the idea that contact with higher beings could result in quote-unquote actual technologies, such as interdimensional propulsion, healing ray devices, and psi amplifiers. Watson and Crick, I believe, had their eureka moment with the DNA double helix while on LSD, so stranger things have happened. The Borderland Sciences Research Foundation, particularly through the channeling sessions of Probert, guided by Meade Layne often, produced a surprising number of highly detailed channeled technologies. These were said to come from the Etherians or other advanced non-terrestrial intelligences communicating via trance. Some of the more notable examples include the Darrow Ray, or detrimental energy ray devices. These come from Riley Crabb's later BSRF material, and they claimed that these devices were able to neutralize harmful etheric or psychic energies. These are based on concepts similar to Reich's orgone theory, as well as the aforementioned radionics. Some blueprints suggested copper coils, crystal oscillators, and pyramidal or conical shapes to transduce subtle energy. They claim to disrupt negative etheric interference caused by underground water currents, ley lines, or black magic thought forms, quote unquote. There is scientific evidence to prove that certain combinations of running underground springs of water, depending on what sorts of stone or crystallized minerals they have contact with underground can affect our health, mental state, etc. These were considered spiritually safer alternatives to nuclear energy, which was very frightening in the minds of humanity at this time, especially in Japan probably. Drew on life force or etheric current instead of electromagnetic fields. There's the Dynadran, which is a etheric propulsion system. This is something channeled by Mark Probert from someone called the Technician, and one of the Ascended Masters, known as Master Hilarion, not related to Alec Baldwin, I don't think. It's claimed to be an anti-gravity propulsion system that uses etheric vortex fields. It's said to work by generating rotating magnetic fields in counterphase, tapping into the subatomic ether. This sounds very similar in structure and function to potentially reported secret propulsion systems that are used in UFOs, according to various government patents. And there are UFO patents that are said to work. Once again, I'm not an engineer or a physicist. I unfortunately have very little knowledge on these subjects, but if anyone listening is familiar with this stuff, I would love to pick your brain about it. So please let me know. The system was said to utilize crystalline matrices and high-frequency vibratory tuning, which allows it to bypass the forces of inertia. The Etherians claim that Earth governments, particularly America and the Soviet Union, had fragments of similar technology but failed due to their materialistic mindsets, which once again, this says something towards the overlap or intersection of radionics or psychotronics with consciousness studies, concepts like the power of positive thinking, etc., belief as a tool, weaponized memetics, thought forms, etc., the ability to chaos magic things into reality. This is the realm we're sort of stepping into right here. There's also the flame speaker and ether voice amplifier, which are directly attributed to the philosopher, quote unquote, which is another channeled entity of Probert's. This is a device to hear or translate higher dimensional messages or etheric vibrations into audible forms. It's described as resembling a cone or a horn made of quartz or beryllium, which sits atop a copper-plated resonance box and functions somewhat like psychic radio, tuned to mental wavelengths or thought forms from the astral plane. Probert and Layne described this technology as being essential for telepathic contact with Etherians without needing the use of a trance medium. Then you have the etheric weather control devices from Layne's BSRF circulars and expanded by Riley Crabb. This is something that the aforementioned Trevor James Constable was very much into, and I believe he had a few inventions of his own as well that involved orgone physics, the aforementioned ether physics, vortex physics, etc. Wilhelm Reich's Cloudbuster incorporates channeler-received enhancements of this nature. Some of these included pyramidal designs with conductive rods, copper spirals, and orgone accumulation chambers, which were said to operate on intent harmonics, where the device's effectiveness was partially dependent upon the user's emotional and spiritual alignments. So once again, we're delving into realms of consciousness studies. Intention and willpower. These are very ill-defined and misunderstood forms of energy and power that, once again, we're just now sort of breaking into this field scientifically, trying to better understand the nature and potential of such forces. Okay, this is a big one. So I'm going to have to split this into two parts. When we come back next time, I'm going to release these at the same time, don't worry. So you don't have to wait a week. But when we come back next time, we'll still be in the middle of radionics. And we're going to get into government infiltration of UFO groups. We're going to get into the dark, dirty side of some of these groups, Nazis, and various other related material. I'm going to let my hair down a bit in the latter half. You'll see. Sorry if I sounded weird. I had to record this on Benadryl, so the extra loopiness is free. Thanks for listening. Catch you in the next episode. Peace.